So good afternoon. My name is Kathy Dugan. I'm the director of the Cleveland Law Library. And we are co-sponsoring this event with Cleveland Public. So I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi there, I'm Helena Tracta. I work with the Cleveland Public Library Social Sciences Department, where I've been most of my career. And ran a few other book clubs and this and that and stuff. And it's always fun to have an author here so that we could interact.
Absolutely. So we're very happy to welcome our guest speaker, Jane Ann Turzillo. She's the author of Wicked Cleveland, very appropriately discussing this month during October. Jane's career in writing and journalism began when she served as a crime reporter for the Fair Lawn Village News, which was a small weekly newspaper. And she and others also started a new publication entitled The West Side Leader. And when she was on that publication, she reported on police and fire news and even wrote a historical crime column. She's published short stories and articles in newspapers and magazines across the United States and Canada, and has won several journalism awards from the National Federation of Presswomen. Just a couple of fun facts about Jane. She's presented book discussions in a lot of places, including a church, a museum, a college, and on a moving train. In addition, her love of crime fiction shows up in the names of her dogs, Doc Holliday and Wyatt. I thought that was fun. So I'm going to get the book discussion started with just a question. Can you tell us a little bit more about your literary career?
Well, I think I started, my sister is a writer, and so she probably is, she's older than I am, and I watched her write. But I really started in earnest when my son was a baby, and I started to write while he was down for a nap. And I just got really into that, and I wrote a fictional book which will never see the light of day because it was so bad, but it was so much fun and entertained me a great deal. And then I joined the University of Akron. Used to have classes that you could take. They were just not for any kind of whatever, like not toward a degree. So one of them was for freelance writing. And I took that, and I made a lot of friends. We got to all be pretty close, and we formed a club after that. And once a month, we got together and we would read our stuff. And then we went to a conference which was given by the Western Reserve magazine, which is a long time dead. And I decided, well, I'd always loved history, so I would like to write for that magazine. But I didn't know what I didn't know what to write. So one of the gals that was in this club with me and I went down to the Summit County Historical Society, and we got in their library. Now, because I had a little kid, I had to take him with me, and he was in one of those umbrella strollers, and he was fairly small, and he was pulling the books off on the shelf down below, and I thought, oh my goodness, they're going to kick us out of here if I don't stop him from doing that. One of the books fell open to, in fact, it's a very old book, and I finally bought a copy of it, Samuel Lane's book, and it was the story of an old-time counterfeiter, James Brown, that operated in the Cuyahoga Valley. And I sat there on the floor and read through it, and I was smitten with the idea of crime. and so I researched that, and that was my first publication, was stories about him, and that was one of my first awards, was for that. It was in the New Orleans Times-Picayune. So that's kind of how I got started. I just got bit, and I probably have written for just about every publication around the Cuyahoga County, well, Northeast Ohio, probably. So
What
that's how
other
I
books,
started.
what other books do you have to your credit?
Well, I started with Arcadia, with Images of America, Bath Township, because I lived in Bath Township at the time. Then my next one was Images of America, Hudson, Ohio. And after that, I worked at the Akron Art Museum, and I did I wrote a lot of the publicity there. And after I kind of retired from working outside the house, I was babysitting my two grandsons. And when they would go down for a nap, I started to think, I want a project. I haven't written anything in a while. So I was just kind of noodling around online, and I happened to find the History Press. And the History Press did history. They published history. And oh, by the way, they did crime as well. So I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I think I'd like to write for them. So I got offline, and a little bit later, an acquisitions editor, and it was kind of serendipitous. An acquisitions editor contacted me and said, I have read your book on Hudson, Ohio. He said, would you like to do a book on Hudson for the History Press? And I said, well, because of the contract that I signed for Arcadia, I did not think I could do another book by the History Press. But I told him I had been looking at the website, the History Press website, and that I would like to do a book for them. And he said, well, shoot me 3 or 4 ideas. So I didn't have 3 or 4 ideas, of course. So I did just pull, I thought, I got to do this in the next 5 minutes, because if I don't, he'll lose interest, And so I just pulled stuff out of my head, and I said, I came up with James Brown, the counterfeiter. I talked about, I sent him Pioneer Women of the Western Reserve, the Akron Police, history of the Akron Police Department, because they had all the great criminals. And the last one, I live in a place called Shady Hollow. So, and we had just been out to dinner, the girls here in the girls where I lived, and we called ourselves the Shady Ladies. So I've said the Shady Ladies. So he came back like 5 minutes later, and he said, how about, instead of Shady Ladies, how about Wicked Women? And so that was my third book, was Wicked Women of Northeast Ohio. And then I did 2 train books. One was Ohio Train Disasters. And the next one was Murder and Mayhem on Ohio's Rails, which was about train robberies and murders and things like that happened on trains. And then I did Unsolved Murders and Disappearances in Northeast Ohio. Then I did Wicked Women of Ohio, and then Ohio Heists, and now Wicked Cleveland. So that's the story of my books.
How long did it take you to compile all the information for this one?
Well, I have kept, when I read something that's interesting, I keep it. I keep it in what I call my hanging file. And I do a lot of research on historic newspaper databases. Genealogy Bank is one, newspapers.com. Of course, the libraries have the newspaper archives. Google has some newspapers, all over. So, it depends on the case or the story that I'm working on, how long each one takes. The research probably takes the longest, and that's the most enjoyable for me. But then then I have to write it. So, but usually my publisher gives me a year to do it. Oh, and I should say that also going back to my books, that now Arcadia owns the History Press, so the two have come together. So, but it usually takes me about a year to do a book. I wish I could take longer, but they only give me a year.
Now, when you write your books, do you go to the locations of where the murders or heists or great robberies were?
Oh yeah, I like to do that very much. Of course, during the pandemic, I couldn't. But I found Google Earth, and I would go on, and there's a way that you can get the little man, and you can travel down the roads, and you can look at stuff, so that I could see where I was going. But yes, I absolutely do like to. I like to go to places. I like to go to the different libraries because, then the librarians can tell me, where the places were. And very oftentimes, the libraries have hanging files of interesting cases. So I always like to look at that. Plus, the librarians can always tell me where the best places for lunch are, So I always have to think of that. And Wendy Coyle and I have done a lot of research together. We help each other out a lot, but yeah, because if I go to a place, I can describe it better if I see it myself rather than a picture or whatever, and I can sort of think to myself, I wonder how those people felt, or I like to see what they saw. Maybe that's kind of a romanticized notion, but it's kind of.
Say, do you get like a vibe or something, like some kind
Yeah.
of vibe of the area? And
Yeah.
I was wondering, I thought it was pretty exciting to learn that you had helped to close the case on Ted Conrad. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just finishing up this book, and I needed another chapter to fulfill the word count. And so it was November the 2nd. It was in the morning, and I opened up my email, and this person whom I will call the source emailed me and said, "Are you still interested in Ted Conrad?" So I thought, well, who is this person, number one? Because I get some, I do presentations. I had done a number of them online, so I don't know how far out they've gone. And I have a website and everything, and the books are out there. So I get some crazies. So now I look each person up that emails me. So I looked this person up, and sure enough, this was a real person. And so I went back and I said, yes, I'm still interested in it. So they sent me the obituary, and I looked at it, and I looked at the picture, and the picture didn't look anything like what I thought he was going to look like, or what the age progression that the U.S. Marshals had done. So I started to read, and I thought, wow, the birth date, except for the year, is the same as Ted Conrad's. And the birthplace, Denver, that's the same, Denver, Colorado. And then I got to his parents' names. And this Thomas Randell, who this person turned in to be, his father's name was Edward, and his mother's name was Rutha Beth, with a maiden name Kruger. And in this case, it was Randell. Well, there was only one Rutha Beth Kruger, and that was Rutha Beth Kruger Conrad, who was Ted Conrad's mother. And so I started getting kind of hot under the collar, and I'm thinking, yeah, maybe this is, so, and I read the rest of the obituary, and it certainly fit him. So I called, when I wrote the original chapter, which was in Ohio Heights, I had talked with Ted Conrad's best friend, Russell Metcalf. So, and I still had his phone number. So I called him and I told him what had transpired. And I sent him the obituary. And he said, it's got to be him. He said, because of the mother's name. And he said, but it sure doesn't look anything like him. So he said, go back and ask this person some questions that, they would know. So I went back and I said, what color were his eyes? How tall was he? And did he speak French? So the person came back and said his eyes were blue, and Ted Conrad's eyes were blue. How tall was he? He was just under 6 feet, and Ted Conrad was 6 feet. They said they didn't know whether he spoke French. So I'm thinking, yeah, this is him. So I went back to the obituary, and he had been married and had a daughter. So I plugged in the daughter's name into Facebook and started looking, and there were a lot of condolences to her about, her father dying. And I kept scrolling through, and there were pictures of him, and he got younger and younger and younger. And as he got younger, I knew he was Ted Conrad. When I had done the original chapter for Ohio Heights, I had talked to the U.S. Marshal, whose name is Pete Elliott, and his father, who was a deputy U.S. Marshal at the time, John Elliott, who was the one that chased Ted Conrad, from border to border, even into Hawaii, I guess. And they had given me all this information to write about him in Ohio Heights. So I knew that with the information I had, I knew I had to go to the U.S. Marshals with it. So the next morning, it was a Thursday morning, I sat down and I wrote an email, and I said, good morning, Marshal Elliott. This is what I have. Here is the obituary. What do you think? And 5 minutes later, he emailed me back and he said, call me, Jane. So I called him, and he said, where did you get this? And I told him. And so he said, so he tried to get on Facebook. I helped him get on Facebook because she had kind of the daughter had kind of a strange, there were a couple of the people the same name. So I helped him get on. And so he was scrolling through, and we were talking, we were on the phone, and he's going, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And finally he said, this is him. And he said, but I have to confirm it. And he said, I'll call you back later this afternoon. So he did. He called me back in the afternoon, and he said, yes, we've confirmed it. He said, this is Ted Conrad. And the sad thing was that his dad had died in between when I had talked to him for Ohio Heights and when this happened. And his dad really, really, really wanted to capture this kid. And, but, it was kind of a sad note, but at least his son, did close the case, did capture Ted Conrad. So that's the story.
What was the most interesting thing you ever wrote about? Or was it one of the topics in this book?
Oh, well, wow. I got, yeah, I've written so many, I've written 9 books, so I got a lot of stories, but the newest book is always the most fun to me. So I would say the things that I liked the most out of this book were the Ted Conrad story, and I liked I like the story on a Big Jim Morton, the bank robber, and yeah, I don't know. I couldn't really pick a a favorite. I like the gambling. I liked the I like the story of uh, the Indians 10-cent beer night. That was fun. So each book has, that there was a jewel robbery in Ohio Heights that I dearly loved him.
Excuse me.
So that, they're each book different, they're different characters.
I looked up what kind of beer they sold at the 10-cent beer night. Do you know what kind it was?
Wasn't it Schlitz? I can't remember.
Stroh's.
Oh,
was Stroh's.
okay, Stroh's, yeah, okay.
I don't even know that name. Yeah, so tell us about the next work that you're planning. Is there
Well,
something?
Yeah,
pipeline?
yes, I'm working on a cold cases book. And I have a number of cases that I'm going to be writing about. Thank goodness I don't have to turn it in until next year because it's going slow. But one of the cases is actually a man that I knew. He was the executive vice president of my dad's contracting company. His name was Norm Liver, and he was murdered in Lakewood. And another one that I'm having getting a lot of information on that I don't think has been out there before is the disappearance of the Hinckley police chief, Mel Wiley. And I'm writing that one right now. And then there's a good one up in Ashtabula about a police chief that, well, I'm pretty sure he was murdered, although they closed the case by saying that he rammed into a tree and with his cruiser. So those are the three that I'm working on right now, and I've got probably 7 or 8 others that I'm gonna be working on.
So I found it interesting that there was ticket scalping going on in Cleveland back to the 1930s. I had no idea.
Oh, sure there were. Oh, sure. Yeah, there was gambling all over the place. I mean, it was just, I guess it was the biggest gambling in, from New York to Chicago. It was just, and again, Cleveland had all what I call the greats, Alvin Karpus and, Dillinger passed through here, the whole bunch. So
I don't know if, Helena, you noticed, but it seemed like a lot of the dens of iniquity, we'll call them, turned into banks today.
that's funny. That's funny. You're right. Yeah, you're right. It has. That's yeah, down around well, Short Vincent, 9th. Yeah, they did. That's the banking industry in Cleveland used to be, the the dens of iniquity, as you call it. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how you talked about the B girls and the peep shows. Those are not things that I knew about. I don't know if our readers did. Did you know about them, Helena?
No, not, well, I've heard of them like in other books and such. I knew what they were, but I never thought about them being here. I don't know why. I don't know, but
Well, I didn't know them about them either until I read Alan Dutka's book. And I'm not going to be able to tell you the name of it.
he's very prolific.
Huh?
He's very prolific.
Yes, yeah. I think it's just about Short Vincent, that area. And he's an extremely interesting man. He's he knows a lot about Cleveland history. And I didn't know about the B Girls or about peep shows or anything like that until I read his book. And so then I had to gather a little bit more information. But I remember when I was quite little, my dad worked downtown, and sometimes my mom would come downtown and go to lunch with dad. And if my mother didn't have anybody to leave me with, she had to bring me with her, and I got to go to lunch with them, And I used to like to do that because I would walk around the office, and the secretaries always had candy on their desks, And let's see, how old would I have been? I'm probably like 6, 7, 8, something like that. And I would avail myself of all the candy that I could, and then of course I wouldn't eat any lunch, but and I would hear the girls, the girls that worked in the office talking about, going to dinner on Short Vincent or around, 9th Street. And, being a little kid, I used to think, and that was back when, when the secretaries dressed up, and wore heels and everything. And as a little girl, I used to think, oh, I want to be just like that when I get to be, that age. And, that stuck in my mind. And as I started to read Alan's book, I remembered, these secretaries and these girls talking about that. So I don't think any of them were B girls or, or prostitutes down there. In fact, I'm pretty sure they weren't. But that's how I got fascinated with, with that area.
Well, my dad used to take us to the theatrical or dinner, and I had no idea of its seedier side,
Yeah.
He told me it was a hangout for lawyers and judges.
Well, and it was, but they also had, they had criminals as well.
Well, I thought it was interesting how the Browns owner, the deal was made for the Browns.
Modell.
Modell. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think many of those kinds of deals happened in those kind of situations anyway. I don't know if they still work that way now or not, but I'm sure they do on some level.
Yeah. I don't know. But that's how the Browns came to Cleveland.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the same way they left for a deal.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Speaking of orange and browns, I had no idea that we had a mayor at one point who hired painters to paint Cleveland orange and black.
Black. Yeah. And he was quite a character. He was just, he filled every position that Cleveland had, because he was, he painted, the reason he wanted them painted that way is because he said that he wanted the people of Cleveland to know which building was which. He wanted them to know what buildings were the federal buildings and the state buildings and the city buildings.
Well, I did some investigation after reading your book, and I learned that they also painted park benches, waste baskets, hydrants, and signs.
Yeah. Yes.
Baskets.
Yeah. 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 He was a character.
So I wanted to ask you guys about the brazenness of the 56-year-old who walked into, was it Society National Bank that you wrote about? Wanted to pick your brain about that. Fast Eddie.
Fast Eddie, yeah. Yeah, well, he had a reputation to keep up. And he had been in prison for bank robberies. And the reason he got the name Fast Eddie is because he could get in and out of a bank in record time and never hurt anybody, never carried, a weapon, until this, until he threatened this time. And that's how he got the name Fast Eddie. But he got caught and went to jail. When he got out of jail, he was not well. He did pull a few, well, he was supposed to be on parole, and being on parole, he was supposed to stay in one place, but of course he didn't. He went out to California and he pulled a few jobs out there. And then he had a heart attack. He had 2 heart attacks. And he stayed in the hospital for, I forget how long. I think it was like a couple of weeks. I don't remember now. But he left the hospital before he was supposed to. But he had his medication. But he decided he wanted to come back to Cleveland because this was kind of home to him. And this is where his wife had been, and where he grew up. And he didn't grow up in great circumstance. And so he read an article in the newspaper about the bank being not burglar proof, robbery proof. And our police officer friend there, Stan, he said not even Fast Eddie Watkins could, the way that we, protect banks now, not even Fast Eddie could get it. Well, that was just like a dare to Eddie Watkins. And he was 56 years old. He was not well, and he wanted to just pull one more and prove that he could do it. And he just kind of got in over his head this time and had to take hostages, and it didn't end well for him.
I just thought how interesting it was that a really well-recognized judge, William K. Thomas,
Yeah.
got involved in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. He even had, so Eddie was a pretty good artist, and apparently his art sold very well, and for some good, for some good money. And the judge even had one of his pieces of art on his wall. They were, I don't know whether you'd say they were friends. Eddie trusted him. He felt that the judge was straight with him. And so, the judge helped him come out of there. He was probably going to have another heart attack. So he probably had a heart attack while he was in there, in the bank.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Cuyahoga River Fire of 1969. And I was just a wee little kid back then. And I, to this day, thought it was the only one there ever was.
No. There's lots of them.
Yeah. And then it has actually been complemented. It's horrible color back then. It's streaming with, refuse and oil and everything. It was called a rainbow of many colors and a sign of prosperity. I found that to be unusual.
Oh yeah, it was just awful. In fact, if somebody fell into the river, their skin would probably burn from all the stuff that was in there. But back in 1969, we weren't paying attention to our resources, our natural resources, and so they just, the companies just kept throwing, acid and paint and anything else in the river, and because they were making money, and that was their main thing. I don't know how the river is today. I suspect it's probably not, it could be better still.
Well, I know they've done a lot of remediation and cleanup. I know that the lake, however, has been closed a lot lately for.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah. Just looking at the attitude that people had toward the river and, gambling and horse racing and whatnot back then, isn't it interesting how times and attitudes have changed? Because, you mentioned that Elliot Ness got a conviction related to a race horse slot machine. And what have we got now? We've got gambling and, betting and just becoming legalized. And
oh, yeah,
change.
yep, yeah. Big casino right down there.
Right, what were you saying, Helena?
I was gonna say the legalization of marijuana and then trying to make recreational become legal and all of that, so who knows what'll happen next.
Yeah,
Yeah, it shows you the evolution of different, morals and different attitudes about things.
Right.
right,
Um,
right.
And there's still a lot of industry along the river, so it made me wonder, it's like I want to drive over there and just kind of see what the river looks like. To see if it's cleared up any or if it's still as dirty, because I wonder if the EPA and everything still keeping such tight reins on things to be sure that things stay clean.
I think they must be because they have, kayaking and these little tiki boats,
You're right.
all kinds of things now traversing the river, and it looks better. It's still not see-through.
Yeah,
It's
I
not as
don't
bad as Hudson, but
And people fish in the river. I don't know that I'd want to eat any of the fish that came out of the river.
well, they say fish in general, you have to be careful about
Mhm.
because of mercury.
Oh, well,
or-
yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And I've heard that shrimp is pretty bad. It's like a vacuum cleaner for the sea.
Yeah, well, that's that, black vein that it has.
Yeah,
Um,
so, I had wondered, I've been to, Pan Am Expo in I've been to the exhibit for the Pan Am Expo in New York, Buffalo. And, we learned about McKinley's, assassination there and all the facilities that were built for the Pan Am Expo. And I thought it was fascinating how they talked about it. You talked about it in the book because I had learned that there was a makeshift hospital that was used. It didn't even have like, poured walls. It was more like paper and, plaster, but it wasn't a permanent building where they took him. And some of the buildings weren't even illuminated where they took him to be taken care of initially.
Well, and he didn't even have the right kind of doctor. He just had whatever doctor, the doctor that was on call.
Yeah, yeah. But it was just interesting that I went as far as Buffalo to learn about McKinley,
Yeah,
And-
well, yeah.
you wrote about him. One other question I had was, how do you think it would work today if the spit and polish, toe the line policy that Cleveland Police Chief Fred Kohler implemented was brought to our police today? How do you think it would go?
Well, I think it went a little bit farther than just the spit and polish. I think I don't think our police would get away with what they, what he wanted them to get away with back then. So, yeah, it probably wouldn't work very well.
Especially in this hiring, problem we're having.
Yeah,
Where Cleveland is offering more money and lessening its restrictions and in order to, get employees.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it would work.
no, not at all.
I do have a question. On page 23, there was something that was mentioned, and I didn't have time to research or look into it. But it was called the Turzillo system.
Oh, okay, that was, what they did was instead of using fingerprints, they measured pictures of, or they measured diameters of the skull, like from the center down to an ear and maybe down to the eye or something like that. There are pictures of it in a lot of the old criminal justice books. But yeah, that
Oh,
was,
okay.
yeah, that was what the Bertillon system was.
Okay. And we were talking about this, where it's the gambling and everything, and Mayor Poet. There was, that page 68, we were talking about blackjacks.
Page 68, I was talking about.
Yeah. Talking about blackjacks, and I kept thinking it was the card game, but it doesn't sound like it was, that's what you were talking about.
And
That's something they use to hit and knock out people.
oh, yes, 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 yes. Okay, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was it was like lead balls in a black leather, heavy black leather. And the police carried them, and they would hit people in the head with them, or hit them anywhere that they, anywhere that they could. Police carried them, and so did some of the criminals carried them.
Yeah. I don't think that's on their list of things anymore.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure, but I don't think police even carry their nightsticks anymore.
I don't know. I think
I don't
now
think so.
tasers are taking over.
Yeah,
Yeah, taser base.
yeah.
So any other questions, Helena?
I'm trying to think. You know what, the one thing about the Cleveland Museum of Art, the thinker falling over, which when I read about that, I thought that was kind of funny, but and I thought it was interesting how it got put back, but if I remember right, they didn't ever, per se, fix the thinker, they just left him as he was.
Mhm.
Ever found out anything else, if it was like a college prank or anything?
No,
Keep
Not
it
that-
quiet.
not that I found. No.
Do you know if there were any other, shall we say heists or, things that happened at the art museum?
I didn't really look into anything else. I was, my sister actually had told me that I had to do the thinker, because she lived around there at the time.
Oh, okay.
She was getting her PhD at Case Western at the time. So she said, "Oh, you got to do the thinker." So
Kind of anything and more on the book, do you?
Okay, well, why don't we wrap it up there on a good ending note, with a big thank you to our author for participating today and sharing her thoughts, and best wishes on your next venture.
oh, thank you for having me. And
We'll send you the link when this is available on YouTube.
okay, yeah, and I had fun, talking with you. So
Just out of curiosity, if you have a second, because I always like asking authors, what do you like reading?
what do I like reading?
Yeah, what kind of books do you enjoy reading?
Oh, I read mysteries.
Mysteries?
Yeah. I just, in fact, I just finished 2 that I can really highly recommend. One was called Forsaken Country by Alan Askins. And actually anything that he wrote is really great. And the other one was the new one by William Kent Kruger, Fox Creek. Is really good. And I had the chance to meet them at BoucherCon last month in Minneapolis. And they were both very, very nice authors. But I had been reading their books for quite some time. So they're kind of my favorites. I like Grisham. I like legal thrillers. I like Conley. And, you know, Lisa Scottolini, I like her a lot.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you again for having me.